Hello friends, welcome back to more Reddit stories about entitled people, crazy people, and everything in between. Hope you're all doing wonderful, and let's get right into today's Reddit posts. Don't bother you anymore? Fine, I won't. I used to live in an apartment building that had shops on the main level. The building next door was the same. The two buildings shared a wall. My building had assigned parking and yellow paper notes to put in our car windows. A restaurant opened up in the building next door. Their owner, manager, and staff began parking in my spot as well as our neighbors. I spoke to the owner and she said she would talk to them again, but didn't think it would help. They were even parking in her spot. Every night I would get home, call them, and ask that the vehicle be moved. I was getting tired of this, when one night they put the manager on because they were busy and didn't have time to deal with my request. He did do it, but told me they wouldn't do it again, and I was to stop calling them. I suggested they stop parking in my assigned spot. He told me he had too many staff to control where they parked, and he was sure they were not parking in my spot and it was probably a customer. You know, because customers always park behind a business and then walk around to the front to get in. The next time I worked evening shifts. I got home and this time there was a Range Rover parked in my spot. I dutifully called the tow truck and not the restaurant. I had to wait for a second tow truck because the first one was not equipped to move a vehicle of that type. Something about being jacked up and stuff. They explained it, and the wait was because I didn't know enough to be able to answer their questions about the truck, so they could send out the right truck first. They towed it, and I went in and went to bed. A few hours later, I was awakened by a phone call from the towing company. I had towed the owner, and he was telling them that it was his parking spot and that I had no right to tow him. They were going to bill me for the tow. I told the caller about my landlord's parking permits, the numerous phone calls to have them move, about being told not to bother them anymore, and that his restaurant was in the next building with a separate parking lot. We said goodbye and I never heard anything more about it. I also was able to park in my spot after. I told my neighbor and he told me just to be safe I should tell the owner of the other building. I popped into her shop and told her. She replied with something to the effect of, "You towed the Range Rover?" I said yes. She started to laugh and basically said, "Good for you," and told me it was the restaurant owner's truck. Still makes me smile when I think of it. I slapped an 11-year-old across the face. I'm 19, and don't really regret a single thing. A couple weeks ago, I was babysitting my best friend's brother. I usually can't stand kids, but my friend was on the verge of a breakdown, so I offered to take the kid off his hands for a bit so he could finish his art school project and relax. Before anyone asks, they don't come from the most stable of families. Their parents are divorced and are barely around to take care of either of them. Hence why I offered in the first place, because I know my friend has been running himself thin lately. Anyway, I took the kid back to my house because there isn't much to do around here and I'm a broke student. And on the trip back, he was already acting like an obnoxious piece of crap, asking me if I ate my dog because I'm Asian, and referring to me as a female every single time we talked. My mom was out running errands and meeting with some of her friends, so it was up to me to watch him. I asked him if he wanted to play a board game. He said no. I asked him if he wanted to play some video games. He said no. I asked if he wanted to go kick a football around since I live in the countryside and there's plenty of space to dick around. He said no. By this point, I had no idea what the kid wanted, so I just kinda let him explore around the house a bit, to which he stumbled across my BB gun. Now, I'm from Europe, which is pretty self-explanatory. You don't come across BB guns, airsoft rifles, and such often, so naturally, he was fascinated with it. I explained that I don't use it to shoot, despite the fact that I do have pellets, came with the gun, never used them, and that I only keep it around for cosplay reasons. I told him he couldn't shoot it because it's still a semi-dangerous piece of equipment. The crap stain threw a full-on tantrum at the ripe age of 11, screaming and crying, yelling and hitting stuff, to which after 5 whole minutes of this, I relented. I told him he could shoot a few as long as he aimed at the big tree in the garden, and only under my supervision. He agrees. I set up the gun, etc., etc. Now I have 5 cats. One of them is a 12-year-old senior cat who spends his days lying around in the garden under patches of sun. He's not slow per se, but he definitely isn't what he used to be. I take the kid out and direct him to the tree. He fires, and all's good. My senior cat is lounging around close by, behind the kid, sleeping away and not bothering anyone. Kid turns to me and asks for some water. To which I say sure, don't fire, I'll be back. As I'm filling up the glass for Mr. Numbskull, I hear a loud yowl, like a really, really loud pained yowl. I immediately dash outside and see the little C word pointing the BB gun at my senior cat, who's lying there essentially screeching in agony. He'd shot my cat, and the absolute smug, crap-eating smirk on his face made me absolutely lose it. I stormed up to him and slapped him right across the face, while simultaneously screaming at him. The waste of space had the gall, the audacity to collapse on his ass and start crying and hiccuping. I scooped up my cat and cradled him, shushing and petting him as I called my mom, explained the situation, to which she came rushing back home, probably broke a couple of red lights and took the cat to the vet. He's fine, by the way. The pellet didn't perforate into him or damage any organs, just got wedged halfway in the skin, painful and costly nonetheless, whilst it landed on me to take the crying C word back home. Nonetheless, there's a reason my best friend is my best friend. He absolutely lost it on the crying bastard, who thought his big brother was gonna comfort him and tell him he didn't do jack. Part of me thinks that my friend absolutely losing it on the kid was his own way of getting his own feelings out. Long story short, I f***ing hate kids. Dad physically removed squatters from late grandfather's property. My grandfather passed away about 20 months ago, and things were left a cluster. He had some leftover property, including the bungalow where my dad grew up, and a shop building from a second-hand furniture/goods business that my uncle now runs elsewhere. About a month ago, we found out that the shop, which has been disused for a few years on account of my uncle taking the business to a more suitable place in town, had squatters who'd been living there for at least a few months. There's a back entrance which must have been left unlocked. No sign of forced entry, no damage, etc., which they got in through and have been using as an entrance and exit. My dad and I each tried asking them to leave, only to be ignored or otherwise told they had a right to be there. As a bit of background here, my dad's always been someone with a loose string of patience, and prefers to deal with things his way. He can be a pain in the ass, but in his head, the only way he can feel secure is if he does it. He's also a fairly big guy, used to train routinely at the gym, and his job, self-employed, means he's active, and in generally decent shape for his age, mid to late 40s, so he doesn't let most things intimidate him, though normally he prefers to talk things out. In this case, however, he was infuriated that these people were living in his dad's property, and at one point he was angry enough that he asked if he could borrow some of my airsoft kit, smokes to be precise, to toss in there and encourage them to leave. As much as I wanted to, I obviously said no, and told him to try getting the police involved. We tried involving the police, but they said it was a civil matter, and so long as the squatters weren't damaging the property or harassing or attacking anyone, there wasn't anything they could do. I'm not that familiar with the law, but I imagine this is BS. However, around here, thanks to the Tory cuts, the police have about 6 PCs covering the whole large town and surrounding villages area, so it seemed we'd get nowhere through any official channels. And between existing finance concerns and the headache involved, my dad didn't want to waste time with a solicitor. Anyway, my dad decided to deal with the issue himself. I came along just because I didn't want him getting hurt or anything. After talking to him a bit, he agreed we'd try and appeal to a sense of human decency and talk to them. He went up to the door and explained the situation, how he was still trying to come to terms with the loss of my grandfather, his dad, and that the shop has some memories for him, etc. It didn't work. They pretty much stonewalled us, told my dad to F off and it wasn't their problem my grandfather died, and that, quote, the stupid twat would have locked up properly if he didn't want us in here, which caused my dad to flip. He went back to the van. We were parked up in the back. You can only get there by a side street. Came back with one of those insect fogger bombs that you use to fumigate the house when you have fleas. We had one left over from our cat and went to the door. The door had been blocked by something, old furniture, at the other side, but after a few attempts he managed to pry it open, set off the fogger, and demanded everyone leave. Most of them 3 left, but another one stayed put, until my dad grabbed him by the collar and dragged him outside. They were a scrawny-looking type. And here I'm going to admit I was in the heat of the moment, but I saw one of the 3 who'd left before coming back with what looked like a walking stick, and I was really worried for my dad, so I got out of the van with the metal pole. It was from stripping some furniture a few weeks ago, bits of scrap all over. Told him to walk off and leave our property alone, which he did. They were gone after that, and my dad and I quickly got to work on checking things were okay. They'd left trash and litter all over the place, and he was worked up enough about the whole scenario that he practically broke down. We locked up this time to make sure they couldn't get back in at all, and since then each day my dad drives by to make sure they haven't returned. I am the most disabled. Flew back to the States this week and experienced this one firsthand. I am disabled from a stroke nearly 3 years ago. I usually walk with a cane except at places like airports or malls, or any place with slick shiny floors. There I use a rolling walker. It's just easier to navigate. Right before boarding on my first flight, there was a huge gaggle of folks blocking where you enter to get your ticket scanned and onto the jetway. That was annoying. Several of them told me to go wait by the gate desk. I did. They were entitled by not allowing me to enter the gate entry point, but not the focus of this. I went up to the desk, apologized for deviating from the plan, and talked to the gate agent. She said no big deal, I can pre-board from there. Now the pre-boarding. Look, I would love to be the last one getting on the flight, because I have no real love for sitting on the stupid plane for 30 to 40 minutes before takeoff. But I know I am slow because of the balance issues and have no desire to hold up anyone behind me. So I pre-board and gate checked the walker. Got scanned, got down the jetway, and had a gate agent ask me to hold where I was, because the cleaning team was still on the plane. While I'm waiting there, comes up behind me an older couple, like my age, and I'm in my early 60s. Neither have visible disabilities, but that's okay. Many people don't look disabled. As we're standing there waiting to board, the wife calls over my shoulder to the gate agent to ask if she can move forward because she's more disabled than I am. The agent says sure, and this entitled lady literally pushed me so hard that I fell right there on the jetway. The agent helped me up but said nothing to the lady and her husband who were now in front of me. I decided it wasn't even worth it to say anything to these idiots. Who pushes someone clearly disabled to get on a plane first? I was stuck behind them for long enough that the regular passengers started boarding and I was scrambling to get settled in. Now obviously, the people that pushed OP over are terrible, but the airline staff are equally awful. First off, they let these guys cut the line just because they claim to be more disabled than someone else. But then when they push someone with a walker onto the ground, they don't even care. They couldn't even be bothered to do anything about it, let alone say anything to them. Sounds like a situation where it would be a good idea to put in a complaint to the airline. However, I also understand you just might not want to deal with that. Anyway, friends, that's going to be all for today. Thank you for watching, I appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe, take care, and I'll see you all next time.